Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today, we're going to read some more Orison Swett Marden. I've recorded about a dozen episodes from Orison Swett Marden. Many of them are just fantastic. I really love all of his writing. It's very motivational. This is coming from the very beginning of the self-development movement, and a lot of the stuff that you hear today from people like Tony Robbins to Zig Ziglar, a lot of the great motivational speakers were inspired by Orison Swett Marden, who is one of the very first authors, and he wrote many books. We've covered many of them so far on the podcast. We've covered an amazing episode called Heart to Talks with Yourself, The Advantage of Obstacles, The Tragedy of Postponed Enjoyment was one of my favorites to read. Living Today in the Here and Now is fantastic. How to Find Yourself, the amazing book Why Grow Old, and my favorite of his books is How to Get What You Want. We haven't covered the book The Victorious Attitude yet, and there's a chapter that I just adore, and it's very powerful, and it's called Have You Tried Love's Way? And here we get a beautiful story-like assessment of the power of love from Orison Swett Marden's beautiful writing. Have You Tried Love's Way? By Orison Swett Marden. Love, like the sun, never sees the dark side of anything. You can purchase a man's labor. You've got to cultivate his goodwill. Sweeter than the perfume of roses is the possession of a kind, charitable, unselfish nature, a ready disposition to do for others any good turn in one's power. A New York man who saw a little girl carrying a crippled boy across the street offered to assist her, telling her that the boy was too heavy for her to carry. "Oh no," said the child quickly. "He's not heavy. He's my brother." Oh, marvelous power of love that lightens all heavy burdens and smooths all rough roads. What would become of humanity were it not for love, which sweetens the hardest labor and makes self-sacrifice a joy? It is the greatest force in the universe. Without its transforming power, we should still be primitive barbarians. In spite of the loud cries of pessimists and skeptics, to the contrary, its light is still leading men upward. Although the dream of the world's peacemakers has come to naught and Europe is plunged in a merciless war, yet there are multitudes of signs of the rains of love. Its merciful healing power is at work even on the cruel battlefield. We see it animating the great army of the Red Cross surgeons and nurses who, regardless of creed or country, racial or social differences, are treating all the wounded soldiers as brothers, binding up their wounds and nursing them back to health and life. Love is healing the hurts made by hate and discord. We see its influence in the miracle which the leaven of the Golden Rule is performing in the business world, in the passion for social service in the world at large, in the gradual obliteration of class distinctions, in the growing efforts to ameliorate the conditions of the poor, in the great wave of reform that is beating against the walls of all our institutions, our jails, our poorhouses, our reformatories, our insane asylums. The abuses with which these places were filled are gradually being cleared up by love. In many of our prisons, the kindly brotherhood system of treatment that has been inaugurated is really helping to reform criminals, whereas the old system of penology killed men, broke their spirit, or made them more hardened in crime. It rarely, if ever, reformed. Love's way must in time banish altogether the old cruel prison methods, and ultimately the criminal himself. When the world is run by love, by the Golden Rule plan, crime will die a natural death. Everyone who slips from the right path, no matter what he has done, should be given another chance, a fresh opportunity to make good, to rebuild his character. One who has sinned against society should not be expelled from the sympathies, the goodwill, and the kindliness of his fellow men. Criminals should be treated as unfortunate brothers and sisters who have stumbled and lost their way on the life path. Love is the only medium that will help them to rise, to get back into the current that runs Godward. People who understand them, who see a God in the ruins that evil influences have made, would make good men and women out of the great majority of our prisoners. Many of these poor wretches never had any opportunity. They never felt the magic touch of love, never knew the influence of a good home, of honest, loving parents. Most of them did not have a right start in life. They were handicapped at birth by ignorance, by disease, by vicious parentage. They never had a fair chance. Love's way would give them one, shutting them into cramped, miserable, sunless cells with none of the comforts or conveniences of life, where none of the humanities reach them. Meeting them out treatment we would not dream of inflicting on our domestic animals is like trying to put out fire with kerosene oil. Such treatment makes them worse, arouses their basest passions of revenge, bitterness, and hatred, fills them with a determination to get even with society. Society is beginning to wake up to the futility of such brutal methods. It is beginning to apply love's way to its criminal classes, to all classes. Our free hospitals, our homes for the aged and poor, our public asylums are all, like our prisons, working upward toward the light. The fallen, the sick, the poor, the old, the maimed, the bruised, and suffering, everywhere are receiving more consideration, more humane treatment, more kindness, and we are finding that greater trust in them, greater sympathy and greater interest in our unfortunate brothers and sisters are working a marvelous change in human conditions. In other words, in spite of many seeming contradictions, many glaring evils in our midst, many setbacks and discouragements, the Spirit of the Christ of the Golden Rule is acting like a healing leaven and performing miracles in the great human mass. Love is the great mind opener, the great heart opener, and life enricher, the great developer. It is what holds society together, and if children were trained to love humanity, to love all countries and their inhabitants, as they are taught to love their own country and countrymen, there would be no wars. War proceeds largely from what is called patriotism. And patriotism in its narrower sense, which seeks only its own good, its own aggrandizement at the expense of other countries and peoples, has ever been the curse of the race. When our love is big enough to say, "The world is my country," wars will cease. A few days ago, I was attracted by an advertisement in a morning paper which said, "When every other physician has given you up, when you have failed to find relief from all the other sources, then come to me. You are the sort of person I cure." The advertiser may have been a quack, but the advertisement would make its appeal, perhaps, to the desperate, the discouraged, who had been given up as incurable by the regular profession, and it set me to thinking, why this? I said to myself, is the language of divine love's advertisement. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. When you have failed to find comfort, satisfaction, or joy in anything else, when your friends have deserted you, when your business is ruined, when you have made fatal mistakes and society has closed its doors on you, when everybody else rejects and denounces you, when everything else has failed, then come to me and you shall find peace and rest. Love is the sovereign remedy. It is the last resort of those driven to desperation, when nothing else is left, when life is full of bitterness and anguish. The thief, the murderer, the failure, the outcast turns to love and finds a refuge, for love never faileth. Love is to every human being what mother love is to the erring child. No son or daughter has ever fallen so low as to get beyond a mother's love. When society has turned its back on the outcast, when the prison door closes behind him, when companions have fled, when sympathy and mercy have departed, when the world has forgotten, the mother remembers and loves her child. She visits her boy in the death house, her daughter in the dens of vice in the slums. The child can never stray too far for the mother's love to follow. It is the most perfect prototype of our Father, Mother, God's love. The Vedanta scriptures, which are thousands of years older than the Old Testament of our Bible, commanded us to love our neighbors as ourselves because we are all neighbors, because of the oneness of all life, because the same Spirit is in all human beings. Until we see and live in conscious cooperation with this oneness of spirit, until the world sees it in all human beings, there will be public strife, private quarrels, greed, selfish ambition, inhumanity of man to man, poverty, crime, all sorts of wretchedness and misery. Love alone can wipe all these out. Human laws, repression, punishment will never do it. Christ's way, the love way, holds the solution of all life's problems. I was talking recently with a cold-blooded, overbearing, browbeating businessman who told me he was going out of business because he was so tired and sick of incompetent, dishonest help. His employees, he said, were always taking advantage of him, stealing, spoiling merchandise, blundering, shirking, clipping their hours. They took no interest in his welfare, their only concern being in what they found in their pay envelope. I have enough to live on, he concluded, and I don't propose to run a business for their benefit. I have tried every means I know of to get good work out of the ignorant, selfish help, but it is no use, and now I have done with it. My nervous system is worn out, and I must give up the game. You say you tried everything you could think of in managing your employees, but has it ever occurred to you to try Love's way? I asked. Love's way, he said disgustedly. What do you mean by that? Why, if I didn't use a club all the time, my help would ride right over me and ruin me. For years, I've had to employ detectives and spies to protect my interests. What do these people know about love? Why would I have the red flag out here in no time if I should attempt any such fool business as that? A young man who had been successful in Golden Rule management, hearing of the situation, saw in it a possible opening and asked this man to give him a trial as manager before giving up his business altogether. The result was, he was so pleased with him that in less than half an hour he had engaged him as manager, although he still insisted that it was a very doubtful experiment. The first thing the new man did on taking charge was to call the employees in each department together and have a heart-to-heart talk with them. He told them that he had come there not only as a friend of the proprietor, but as their friend also, and that he would do everything in his power to advance their interests as well as those of the business. The house, he told them, had been losing money for years, and it was up to him and them to change all that and put the balance on the right side of the ledger. He made them see the harmony and cooperation are the basis of any real success for a concern and its employees. From the start, he was cheerful, hopeful, sympathetic, enthusiastic, encouraging. He quickly won the confidence and goodwill of everybody in the establishment and had them all working as heartily for the success of the business as if it were their own. The place was like a great beehive where all were industrious, happy, contented, working for the hive. So great was the change that customers began to talk about the new spirit in the house. Business grew and prospered, and in an incredibly short time, the concern was making instead of losing money. Yet in many respects, the new manager was not nearly as able as his employer, but he had a different spirit. He was animated by a belief in the brotherhood of man. He had sympathy, tact, diplomacy, and a real personal interest in those who worked under him. He never scolded them when they did not do right. He simply talked with them like an elder brother and made them ashamed of themselves. He showed them there was a better way, and they followed it. In short, he won their love and respect, and they would do anything for him. The Golden Rule method had driven out hate, selfishness, greed, and dissension. The interests of all were centered on the general welfare, and so all prospered. When the proprietor returned from abroad, whither he had gone for a few months' rest and recuperation, he could scarcely believe in the reality of the transformation that Love's way had effected in his old employees and in the entire establishment. You who have been tortured and torn to pieces for years with hot tempers, with worry, with fear, with hatred, and ill will, you who have already committed suicide on many years of your life, why not turn your back on all this and try Love's way? So far, your life has been a disappointment. There must be a better way for all who bear the scars and stains of strife, who have been battered and buffeted by the old evil way, in which there has been no rest, no harmony, no sweetness. Why not try Love's way? Try it for every trouble, for every hurt and sorrow. Try it. You whose home life has been a bitter disappointment, you husband and wives who have quarreled, who have never known what peace and comfort are, try Love's way. It will smooth out all your wrinkles. It will put a new spirit into your home that was never there before. It will bring a new light into your eyes, new hope into your heart, and new joy into your life. Your mothers who have worn yourselves to a frazzle and prematurely aged yourselves in trying to bring up your children by scolding, nagging, punishing, driving, why not try Love's way instead? You can love your boys and girls into obedience and respect much more quickly, and with far better results to them and to yourself than by driving them. Appeal to their best and noblest instincts instead of their worst. And you will be surprised how quickly and readily They will respond to your appeal. There is something in human nature which protests against being driven or forced. If you have been trying to force your boys and girls in the past, give it up and try the new way, love's way. See if it does not work wonders in your home. See if it will not make your domestic machinery run much more smoothly. See if it will not wonderfully relieve the strain upon yourself. Give love's way a trial. Try it. You fault-finding, scolding housewife. Instead of nagging your family, fretting and stewing from morning till night, blaming, upbraiding, complaining, try love's way. Instead of berating a maid before your guest when she accidentally breaks a piece of china, put yourself in her place, try to realize her embarrassment and pass over the mishap cheerfully. Then in private, give her a gentle word of caution. She will be more careful in the future. If your laundress returns a piece of smirched linen, or if her work is not quite so well done as it was the last time, don't give her a brutal scolding. Harsh treatment will only make her sullen and unhappy, but you will find her susceptible to kindness and gentle words. Give sympathy and kindness instead of scolding and nagging, and you will work a revolution in your household. You will be delighted to find how quickly love's way will change the atmosphere in your family. How soon helpful relations will take the place of antagonistic ones. Praise, generous, wholehearted, unstinted praise, now and then, will not hurt anyone, but on the contrary will act like a lubricating oil on dry, squeaky machinery, and its reflex action on yourself will be magical. You husbands who have been substituting money and luxury for love, who have thought that if a woman had a fine house, beautiful clothes, and all her bills paid, she ought to be satisfied and happy. You who have so miserably failed of your object in this substitution will be surprised to find how much happier you can make your wife by bestowing on her a generous, unselfish love. A very little money, a very humble home, with love will make every true woman happier than millions, a palatial home with indifference. Try love's way. You men who have been lording it over your families, bullying and browbeating your wives and children, using slave-driving methods in your home. You know that this old brutal way has not brought you happiness or satisfaction. You've always been disappointed with it, then why not try the new philosophy? Try love's way. It is the great cure-all. It is the Christ remedy, which is leavening the world. Try it, you who are worn out with the discord and hagglings, the trials and tribulations you encounter every day in your business. You men and women who have been able to get good help, who are driven to desperation with the wicked breakage and wastage of your employees. You who have been through purgatory in your struggle with dishonesty and inefficiency, whose faces are furrowed with cruel wrinkles and prematurely aged in trying to fight evil with evil. Try love's way. It will create a new spirit in your store, your factory, your office. Whatever your business, whatever your trials and difficulties, love will ease the jolts of life and smooth your way miraculously. Try love's way, all who have hitherto lived in purgatory because you did not know this better way. You've tried the getting square policy, the hatred and grudge method. You've tried the revenge way, the jealousy way. You've tried the worry, the anxiety method, and these have pained and tortured you all the more. You've tried law and the courts to settle troubles and difficulties with neighbors and business associates, and perhaps you won lawsuits only to make bitter, lifelong enemies. But perhaps you have never yet tried love's way, accepting in spots. If you have not yet tried it as a principle, as a life philosophy, as a great life lubricant, begin now. It will smooth out all the rough places and wonderfully ease your journey over the jolts of life. You may be wondering why you have so few friends, why you do not attract people, why others are not more interested in you. Look into your heart, and you will find the reason. If you are sending out a current of selfishness, of uncharitableness, unkindness, indifference, ingratitude, you cannot get a return current of friendship, of encouragement and helpfulness. The stream that leads back to you will be just like that which goes out in your thought, in your habitual mental attitude. To have friends, to win love, you must make yourself a magnet for love. You must send out the friendly thought current, the helpful current, the kindly, loving current of human fellowship. If you give out stinginess, narrowness, meanness, selfishness, you will not receive love's gift in return. As you give, so you will receive, and the more generously you give of love and kindness and service, the more generously will the current that returns bear them back to you. The most beautiful thing on this earth, that which every human being craves most, is love. It is as Henry Ward Beecher said, the most beautiful thing on this earth, that which every human being craves most, is love. It is as Henry Ward Beecher said, the river of life in this world. Think not that ye know it who stand at the little trickling rill, the first small fountain, not until you have gone through the rocky gorges and not lost the stream, not until you have gone through the meadow and the stream has widened and deepened until fleets could ride on its bosom, not until beyond the meadow you have come to the unfathomable ocean and poured your treasures into its depths. Not until then can you know what love is. All through the Bible are passages which extol the height and depth, the breadth and power, the inexhaustibleness of love. The more of love we give out, the more we have. Love maintains perpetual summer in the soul and shouts out winter's chill. Love of man is love of God, and love of God prolongs life. With long life will I satisfy him, declares Jehovah in the words of the psalmist, because he hath set his love upon me. Love is harmony, and harmony prolongs life, as fear, jealousy, envy, friction, and discord shorten it. Those who are filled with the spirit of love, whose sympathies are not confined to their own family but reach out to every member of the human family, are more exempt from the ills of mankind than the selfish and pessimistic, who lose the better part of life, the joy and the strength that come from giving themselves to others. Some natures are so permeated with the spirit of love, of helpfulness, of unselfishness, that their very presence acts like a balm upon the wounded soul. They radiate harmony, soul sunshine. There is a personal charm about them which strengthens, reassures, and uplifts. No more scientific advice was ever uttered on this earth than love your enemies. Nothing will take the sting out of unkindness like kindness. Nothing will disarm prejudice, hatred, and jealousy like love. It is impossible for anyone to continue to hate us when we send out to him only love thoughts, love vibrations, or to be jealous of us when we send out to him only kindly, generous, helpful thoughts. Hatred or the spirit of revenge cannot live in the presence of love any more than an acid can retain its eating, biting qualities in the presence of an alkali. One whose heart is filled with love for all cannot possibly have an enemy very long, because love dissolves all enmity, all jealousy, neutralizes, antidotes all hatred. One-sided hatred cannot exist because there is nothing to keep it alive. It must be fed in some way, or the fire will die out for lack of fuel. It is simply impossible to keep on feeling unkindly towards another, to continue hating him very long when we discover that he feels kindly toward us and is willing to help us. I have never felt so humiliated in my life as when, years ago in my hot youth, I was rendered a very great service by a man whom I disliked intensely, and against whom I had for some time cherished a grudge. His great-hearted, generous act, which was a real help to me, made me feel utterly ashamed of myself. It showed me as nothing else could have done what a mean, unworthy, contemptible thing it is to nurse a feeling of hate or revenge toward a fellow being. We cannot hold the love thought without feeling the uplift, the glow, the divine energy which it sends through the whole system. Nor, on the other hand, we can hold the hate thought, the revenge, the jealous, the envious, or any other mean, selfish thought without a feeling of depression, a feeling of smallness, of contemptibleness, which robs us of self-respect and of power. When you denounce and condemn others, when you nurse bitterness and ill will in your heart, you start boomeranging vibrations which impair your cell life and seriously mar your happiness and efficiency. One of the great benefits of devotional exercise, of prayer, of contemplation, of divine thinking is that this mental attitude sets in motion vibrations which have a helpful, uplifting influence on both mind and body. Where love and affection are habitually vibrating through the cell life, they develop a poise and serenity of character, a sweetness and strength, a peace and satisfaction that reinforce the whole being. Love soothes and strengthens. Hate lacerates, wrinkles, and weakens. The character of people who keep themselves continually stirred up by discordant emotions, who live in discordant homes where there is perpetual wrangling, criticism, denunciation, scolding, twitting, are cold, skeptical, unlovely, selfish. Their affections become marbleized. There is nothing outside of vice which will deform the character so quickly as living in an atmosphere of perpetual hatred, jealousy, envy, and revenge. The wear and tear of their vicious vibrations is ever getting in its deadly work. Love is the great disciplinarian, the supreme harmonizer, the true peacemaker. It is the great balm for all that blights happiness or breeds discontent. A sovereign panacea for malice, revenge, and all brutish passions and propensities. As cruelty melts before kindness, so the evil passions find their antidote in sweet charity and loving sympathy. One reason why a happy home is the sweetest, most beautiful spot on earth is because the love atmosphere, the harmony vibrations give a blessed sensation of harmony, of rest, of safety, security, and power. The moment we enter such a place, we feel its soothing, reassuring, uplifting atmosphere. It produces a feeling of mental poise, of serenity, which we do not experience anywhere else. During a recent visit to a large family, I was impressed by the power of one person to create this beautiful home spirit. In this family was one sister who, though the youngest member, seemed to take the place of the mother who was dead. The young girl was the apparent center of the home. Nothing of importance was undertaken by any of her brothers without consulting her. Not one of them would leave the house without first kissing her goodbye, and she was the first one they sought when they came home. They all seemed anxious to confide to her their little secrets, to tell her of what had happened to them during the day, to have her opinion and advice in all difficulties. The secret of this young girl's influence lay in her great interest in the boys and her wonderful love for them. In talking with the brothers, I discovered that each thought that the sister was especially interested in him and his affairs, and that he would not think of undertaking or deciding anything of importance without first consulting her. Each and all of them seemed to prefer her company to that of any other young lady, and were always proud to escort her when she went anywhere. Those boys are all clean-minded, open, frank, and chivalrous. And I could not help thinking that a great deal of it was due to the sister's influence. To love and to be loved, said Sidney Smith, is the greatest happiness of existence. Everyone, rich and poor, high and low, is reaching out for love. What will not a man do to win the love of one who embodies his ideal of womanhood, one in whom he sees all the beautiful qualities that he himself lacks? This love is really a divine hunger, the longing for possession of what would make him a whole man instead of the half one he feels he is. Why is it that when a coarse-grained, brutal, dissipated man falls in love with a sweet, pure girl, he immediately changes his ways, looks up, thinks up, braces up, drops his profanity, is more refined, more choice in his language, more exclusive in his associations, and is, to all appearances, for the time at least, a changed man? Simply because love is a more powerful motive to the man than dissipation. He drops the latter, and if his love is steady and true, he will never again indulge in any degrading practice. Who has not seen the magic power of love in transformation, rough, uncouth men into refined and devoted husbands? I've known women who had such great, loving, helpful hearts, and such charm of manner, that the worst men, the most hardened characters, would do anything in the world for them, would give up their lives even to protect them. But these men could not be reformed by prison methods, could not be touched by unkindness or compulsion. Love is the only power that could reach them. I do not believe there is any human being, in prison or out, so depraved, so low, so bad, that there is somebody in their world who could control him perfectly by love, by kindness, by patience. Many a man has been kept from performing a criminal act by the thought that somebody loved him, believed in him, trusted him. Though thy sins be as scarlet, they shall be made whiter than snow. Love purifies, lifts up, regenerates. We are all familiar with its wonderful transforming power, how it erases the scars of sin, soothes out the wrinkles which vice has left in the face, softens the hard features, and puts its own divine stamp there. We know how it changes the coarse, brutal, sinful man into its own divine likeness, how it brings the color back to the pale cheek, the luster to the dull eye, how it restores courage to the disheartened, hope to the distressed and the despairing. We know how it calls into the face a light which was never there before, and which is not of earth. In the remarkable play, The Passing of the Third Floor Back, we have a striking illustration of the subtle, silent force of the love motive. Those who have seen or read the play will remember how, in response to an advertisement in a London paper, Room to Let, Third Floor Back, comes a remarkable man who is given the title of the Stranger. This man takes the third floor back and finds himself in a boarding house filled with questionable characters, petty thieves, gamblers, people who have led fast lives, all sorts of uncharitable, envious men and women. They stoop to every kind of meanness. One woman even steals candles. Everyone tries to cheat everyone else and is cheated in return. The landlady is of the same type as her boarders. She preys on them and they prey on her. She waters the milk and adulterates the food. Then, to keep herself from being robbed, she puts everything under lock and key. The mere presence of the stranger seems antagonistic to the practices and low-flying ideals of the boarders and the landlady. They begin to make all sorts of fun of him, but he takes no notice. Instead, he gives them kindness for unkindness, love for hate, and a pleasant smile as the only answers to their sarcastic cutting remarks and innuendos. Gradually, as they become better acquainted, he begins to talk to them of themselves, to point out their good qualities, and to show them what great ability they have in certain lines, what wonderful things are possible to them. He told one of the young men who had made merry at his expense that he had a fine artistic temperament, and that he had in him the makings of a great artist. He showed another his possibilities as a musician, and so on, with every member of the discordant, jangling group, until each one finally came under the spell of his love and kindness. The little London slavey, or maid of all work, who was abused and constantly reminded that she had been in state prison and hence was a nobody under the stranger's uplifting influence, became a self-respecting, noble woman. The landlady, who had hitherto treated the girl like a slave, began to favor her and made her go out stores and get a little change while she did the work. A man and wife who had lived a cat and dog life were brought together in harmony. All the boarders, without exception, even those who had been the most brutal and selfish, gradually changed and became thoughtful, helpful, and kindly toward one another. They became friends. The whole atmosphere of the house was changed. The stranger had shown every man and woman them his or her better self, and in so doing had literally made them anew. Thus did one who typified the Christ spirit, the simple, quiet man who loved his fellow men and who found his greatest joy in serving others, manage to divert all these people out of the crooked channels in which they had lived and into the right path toward happiness. Love, discovering to them these higher possible selves, transformed them. This is love's way. Love tames the fiercest animals. How quickly their wild, ferocious expression is replaced by a milder, softer, more gentle one under the kindly treatment of one who really loves them, one who looks upon them as did St. Francis, as his little dumb brothers and sisters. The brute nature is gradually softened, and distrust gives way to confidence. The suspicious look is replaced by a trustful one. Affection takes the place of dislike and fear. Love goes out to meet love. Is there any more beautiful illustration in nature of the influence of love and kindly treatment than the evolution of our pet dogs from the ferocious wolf? Note the gentle, peaceful face of a cow or a horse which has been brought up as a family pet. Such animals would not step on or injure a child any more than we would ourselves. We love and trust them, and they love and trust us in return. Love begets love. Some people mistake selfishness or self-love for real love. Everywhere we see the sort of base substitute which says, if you do this for me, I'll do that for you. The woman that says to a man in her heart, if not with her lips, if you'll support me and give me a home, I'll love you, does not love. This is selfishness. A great many people confuse love of the thing given with love of the giver. They mistake the love of their own comforts of a good time, of dress and luxuries, for love of the person who supplies them with these things. This is a mere travesty of the genuine thing. Love simply loves and asks nothing in return. There is no self in it. Abuse, bitterness, indifference, ingratitude do not change or destroy love. It simply loves on. And no love is ever lost, whether it is returned or not. Genuine love is a force that always wins out. Even if it is not reciprocated, it wins by chastening, softening, elevating, beautifying, and enriching the life of the one who loves. This is love's way. What mothers endure for many years for their children would kill them or drive them to an insane asylum in half the time but for love. This is the healing balm that cures all hurts, lightens all burdens, that takes the drudgery out of service. It is love alone that enables the poor mother to risk her life for her child, to go through terrible experiences in her struggles with poverty and sickness to rear her children. A burden half as great, which had no love in it, would crush the life out of her. But love lightens the load, takes the sting out of poverty, the pain out of sacrifice. The same thing is true of the loving father, though his burden in the nature of things is rarely as heavy as the mother's. But he is often virtually a slave for half a lifetime or more for those he loves, and he is a real man. He does not complain. The love lightens the burden and cheers the way. Where the heart is, there the burden is light. A new commandment give I unto you, that ye love one another. As I have loved you, love ye also one another. In the literal fulfilling of this commandment lies the salvation of the world. Among the many noble souls of our own time who have tried to live in accordance with it, one of the most conspicuous was Count Leo Tolstoy. In one of his own beautiful stories, Tolstoy shows how everyone, no matter what his station or how poor his circumstances, may do this by following the master's example and treating every human being as we would a loved member of our own family. A very devout Russian peasant, so runs the story, had prayed for years that the master might sometime come to his humble cabin home. One night he had a vision in which the master appeared to him and told him he would come to his cabin the next day. Filled with joy, the peasant awoke. So real seemed his vision that he arose and immediately went to work putting his cabin to rights and preparing for the expected heavenly guest. A terrible storm of sleet and snow raged throughout the day. While performing his simple household duties, heaping fresh logs in his crude fireplace, preparing his pot of cabbage soup, the Russian peasant's daily dish, the man would look out into the storm with anxious, expectant eyes. Presently he saw a poor, half-frozen peddler with a pack on his back, struggling toward the light, but almost overcome by the fierce blasts of snow and sleet that beat upon him. The peasant rushed out and brought the wayfarer into his cabin. He dried his clothing, warmed him, fed him some of his cabbage soup, and started him on his way again, comforted and rejoicing. In a little while he saw another traveler, a poor old woman, trying feebly to beat her way against the blinding snow. Her also the compassionate peasant took into his cabin. He warmed and fed her, wrapped his own coat about her, and, strengthened and encouraged, sent her too on her way. The day wore slowly away and darkness approached, but still no sign of the master. Hoping against hope, the man went once again to his cabin door, and looking out into the storm, he saw a little child, who was utterly unable to make his way against the blinding sleet and ice. He took the half-frozen child in his arms, brought it into the cabin, warmed and fed it, and soon the little wanderer fell asleep before the fire. Sorely disappointed because the master had not appeared, the peasant sat gazing into the fire, and as he gazed, he fell asleep. Suddenly the room was radiant with a light that did not come from the fire, and there stood the master, white-robed and serene, looking upon him with a smile. "Ah, master, I have walked and watched all this day long, but thou didst not come to me." The The master replied, 3 times have I visited thy cabin today. The poor peddler whom thou rescued, warmed and fed, that was I. The poor woman to whom thou gavest thy coat, that was I. And this little child whom thou hast saved from the tempest, that is I. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, you have done it unto me. The Christ vision faded. The peasant awoke. He was alone with the child, who was smiling in its sleep, but he knew that the master had visited his cabin. The love of God, I said, and at the words through all my being went a sudden shudder of light. The firmament not otherwise seems riven by the red, jagged lightning flash that quivers overhead, when for an instant heaven and earth are blent. So for a dazzling space my heart was rent, and I beheld, but all had fled, nor has returned yet on my way along the pave or through the clanging mart. Sometimes a stranger's eye falls full on mine. You too, we have no speech, we make no sign, but something seems to pass from heart to heart, and I am full of gladness all that day. C.I. Price in Scribner's Magazine. And this concludes this amazing chapter, Have You Tried Love's Way, by Orison Swett Marden. And I really love, and in particular, the way this gives very realistic examples of the way that love can change any situation. When you change the way you are with others, if you move away from hate and anger, even in situations that are pretty tough for you, and you think of it in a loving way. If you're a boss and you're working and telling people they have to get their deadline done and screaming at people and being suspicious of people, you may be failing at what you're doing. Look for love's way. If you are just moving into the back end of an apartment complex and everybody around you seems to be criminals and terrible, you can build them up. You are the love in that moment. And we get something beautiful here that is really important. A lot of times you're going to find yourself as the only source of the love in the moment, and that is your job. Your role is to bring love to people. The greatest things that you can do is be complimenting towards somebody, listen to somebody, do something loving for somebody. When they feel that love and it's genuine and it's not selfish and it's coming from your heart, it will change the way they interact with you, and it'll change the world around them. They'll go be loving to others because they'll see that as an example of how to act in the world. And so in your family, if you're struggling with your wife or husband, if that's the case, look for where love can be present. There's some very difficult situations out there with people that are abusive and tough and struggle. Even in those situations, love can find a way. Love will always find a way. Look for love's way. And the question is, have you tried love's way? Look in your own life and the way that you interact and participate in situations with other people. And do you act in a quid pro quo? Do you act in a competitive manner where it is about you and what you get out of the situation? Or do you really look at the other person completely as you, in the oneness of you? As the story at the end tells, all the people that come to the cabin, and they are all the master. Everyone is God, and everyone is all around you, almost testing you. Are you loving in that moment? Because you're the source of the love. And if we embrace this and look for ways to be loving with the people around us, in situations around us, in our jobs, in whatever it is, then you can slowly transform the world. You look out into the world and it looks terrible. There's so much hate and anger and terrible things happening. But then you look within yourself and you see the love and you think, oh, that's irrelevant. I'm just one person. But no, your love can infect like the greatest virus. And if you act in a loving manner towards the people in your life, even the people that you hate, you will transform them. As he says here, he gives a great example of somebody that he hated, that he deeply did not like, and that person did a loving thing for them, and it completely changed the way that they understood themselves and that relationship. If you really want to get after somebody that you hate, then love them. They may not like it, but it will always be the right thing to do. You are not weak in loving. There is a great misunderstanding that you are weak and that those who are loving are always weak. And it's simply not true. Love is very powerful. And if you continue to unflinchingly follow the path of love, you will always find you are the primary source of the love in your environment, and you can make it grow and expand it. And then you'll see that the people around you are also sources of love, and it just continues to grow. We can change the love in this world, and it starts with you. So ask yourself, have you tried love's way? You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.